has not worked. I have reviewed the language of Measure 91, and it's very well written. I think it's a good bill.
Measure 91 regulates marijuana for adults, so police have time to fight serious, violent, and unsolved crime.
And here in Washington, wasteful arrests down, DUIs down, drug prevention programs are getting funds. Strict regulations are working. Here, it's really better, already. Vote yes on 91.
You take a seed, you plant it, you grow it, you dry it, you roll it, you smoke it, and it goes down smooth. Hey!
Spanning the continent to bring you the truth about cannabis and marijuana law reform.
I smoke pot and I like it a lot.
The Russ Belville Show, the voice of the marijuana nation. Now, here's your host, Radical Russ Belville.
Good day, tokers and tokettes and non-toking lovers of liberty, and welcome to the show. It is Thursday, October 30th, 2014, and it's got to be 420 somewhere in the world, and it's got to be just 5 days away until we legalize marijuana in Oregon, Alaska, and Washington, D.C., before we legalize medical marijuana in Florida and Guam, and before we take the votes of 57 cities and counties all across this great country that are voting for medical, decrim, or full legalization. Join us on Marijuana Election Night, Tuesday, November 4th. We'll be beginning at 3 p.m. Pacific Time, coming to you from the headquarters of the Measure 91 celebration. We've got people calling in from NORML, Law Enforcement Against Prohibition, Drug Policy Alliance, Marijuana Policy Project, and independent marijuana reformers from all over the country. People that are volunteering to be a part of this great show that we're putting on coming up this Tuesday. You'll hear it first right here on 420radio.org. Now, for the show today, our special guest today in Law Enforcement Against Prohibition, our Cops Say Legalized Drug segment, we have got one of the board members from LEAP. It's Diane Goldstein, a big friend of the show. She'll be joining us to talk about California's Proposition 47, another vote that we'll be covering on Marijuana Election Night that's not getting a lot of play. This is one that would defelonize 6 different crimes in the state of California, one of those being low-level possession cases. We'll get Diane to explain the whole thing and to get her take on what's happening in marijuana reform and marijuana election night. Now, speaking of election night, you know, there was a video that I showed yesterday, or I may have talked about it yesterday, where I was featured on the station in Medford, KTVL, that was doing a 5-part series on marijuana. Well, yesterday they continued that series, and it amounted to little more than a 5-minute free ad for the No on 91 campaign. It was pretty bad, folks. So we're going to save that up for the Radical Rant today. It'll be an extended Radical Rant that'll go out over into hour 2 as well. There's so much reefer madness in there that was allowed to be broadcast across KTVL in Southern Oregon with absolutely no rebuttal, absolutely no fact checking. Like I said, it was pretty much a 5-minute ad for the No on 91 campaign. Also, we've got some details from our friend Doug McVeigh with Drug Policy Facts. Doug has uncovered the ownership behind that station down there in Southern Oregon and explains why it's not so surprising that they would be in the pocket of the sheriffs and the people against marijuana legalization. Also coming up on the show today, how many tokers work full-time? Sheriff Tom Bergen here in Oregon had a quote in a recent story saying, "The potheads don't have day jobs and we do. Their job is just to legalize marijuana." So that's going to lead our drug war data mining for today. We're going to find out just how many potheads work full-time and part-time compared to those who don't smoke marijuana in the state of Oregon. The numbers will surprise, well, they'll surprise Sheriff Tom Bergen. Probably not any of us. Also, we're going to go behind the headlines and take a look. Radley Balco from Washington Post and Reason and Huffington Post has done some more uncovering on the serious breach of our civil liberties going on under the name of the USA PATRIOT Act, where it turns out that most of the sneak and peek searches that have been granted the power to our government and our cops and our law enforcement under the PATRIOT Act, supposedly to fight terrorism, guess what they're using them for? I'll give you 2 guesses, and the first one doesn't count. It's drugs. Plus, we've got our 420 radio news in the headlines today. We've got more news out of Oregon, D.C., Michigan. We've also got a story out of Cincinnati and Chile coming up right after this break.
Russ Belville Show, the voice of the marijuana nation.
420 Radio, the activist radio station.
Voting yes on 2 will allow doctors to recommend the medicine they feel will ease the pain and suffering of thousands of sick Floridians. Yes on 2 allows medical marijuana use under the strict supervision of a doctor, only for debilitating conditions and diseases such as cancer and MS. 23 states now keep government and politicians out of the doctor-patient relationship, and it's worked. Vote yes on 2 and trust our doctors to do what's best.
Herb Thrasher Flower Hour, every Friday at 5 and 8 Pacific on.
It's time to vote yes on Measure 91. Oregon judges, prosecutors, and law enforcement agree Measure 91 is the better approach to marijuana.
Vote yes on 91.
Oregon teachers, moms, and drug treatment professionals say
vote yes on 91.
Newspapers agree Oregonians should vote yes on Measure 91. It's straightforward and sensible. It's time to legalize marijuana. Join your fellow Oregonians. Vote yes on 91.
It's time for the 420 Radio News, covering the latest headlines in consumer cannabis, medical marijuana, and industrial hemp. Transcripts of 420 Radio News are available daily on our website at 420radio.org. Now, here's Russ Belville with your marijuana headlines in 4 minutes and 20 seconds. This is your 420 Radio News for Thursday, October 30th, 2014. A coalition of law enforcers has come out in support of marijuana legalization in Oregon less than a week before voters will decide the issue at the polls. Treating marijuana as a crime has failed. 34 former police officers, sheriffs, prosecutors, and judges write in a letter released Wednesday by Yes on 91, the campaign supporting legalization in Oregon. Quote, arresting and citing thousands of people in Oregon and elsewhere for marijuana-related crimes is a distraction to law enforcement and a misuse of taxpayer resources. The time and money should be spent to make our communities safer. Police resources should be focused on violent criminals, thieves, and criminal cartels. End quote. Signers include Pete Tutmark, former Oregon County Deputy Sheriff, Chris Olson, retired U.S. Attorney for the District of Oregon, Norm Stamper, retired Seattle Police Chief, Tony Ryan, former Denver Police Department Lieutenant, and Stephen Downing, retired Los Angeles Police Department Deputy Chief. Should D.C. residents vote to legalize marijuana possession next week, it would take a step toward creating a $130 million a year legal cannabis market in the city, D.C. financial officials have determined. The ballot initiative voters will see Tuesday does not allow for the sale of marijuana, only the possession and home cultivation of small amounts. But D.C. council members gathered Thursday to hear testimony on what a legal sales regime might look like. Testimony prepared by city financial officials pegs the potential size of the market at $130 million a year, based on an estimate of 122,000 users, including residents, commuters, and tourists, each consuming 3 ounces of marijuana costing an average of $350 per ounce. An initial version of the marijuana regulation bill before the council sets a sales tax of 15%, suggesting yearly government revenues of nearly $20 million. But the financial office declined to estimate tax revenue, citing the unfinished nature of the regulatory legislation and the difficulty in determining how many current marijuana users will migrate from the black market to legal taxed purchases. On November 4th, voters in 11 Michigan cities will consider legalizing small amounts of marijuana. That's the largest number of municipalities to ever consider the question in a single election in the state. The proposal would make it legal for anyone over 21 to possess up to an ounce of marijuana on private property. Several Michigan cities, including Hazel Park, have already decriminalized or legalized marijuana. City manager Edward Klobuchar says not much has changed since the legalization of small amounts of marijuana, and he doesn't expect it to. While pro-marijuana activists want to place marijuana legalization on the state ballot in 2016, it is believed by some that it might be a while longer before that actually occurs. But pro-marijuana advocates have put 16 measures on local ballots, and they haven't lost once. Cincinnati City Council has passed a marijuana law that could clear the record of up to 10,000 people convicted of minor pot offenses. The proposal from Councilmember Charlie Winburn passed unanimously at Wednesday's meeting. Winburn had argued that the city's 2006 marijuana law was too tough on minor offenders. While state law imposed a $150 citation for possession of less than 100 grams, city law made it a misdemeanor. That gave offenders a criminal record and also carried a fine of $250 and up to 30 days in jail. Winburn had said some people found it hard to find a job with that charge on their record. In addition, Winburn wants the city to ask the state to amend its expungement laws to seal all misdemeanor 1 and misdemeanor 4 marijuana charges. A Chilean municipality planted the country's first medical marijuana on Wednesday as part of a pilot program aimed to ease the pain of cancer patients. The 850 seeds were imported from the Netherlands, and oil extracted from about half of the plants will be given to 200 patients selected by a municipality in the capital of Santiago and by the Daya Foundation, a non-profit group that sponsors pain-relieving therapies. A law passed in 2005 allowed medical use of marijuana in Chile, but only with approval by the county's agricultural service. It passed only one earlier effort in 2011, but quickly rescinded permission after opposition from health authorities. This time, the organizers won the backing of the state as well as a local university, which will use the project for research in the effectiveness of fighting diseases through the use of marijuana. The federal hearing on marijuana's Schedule 1 designation continues today. We will get more reports from The Leaf Online. Jeremy Daw has been covering the case for The Leaf and has some great articles written on The Leaf Online. Please check those out. This has been your 420 Radio News for Thursday, October 30th, 2014. I'm Russ Belville. 420 Radio, the home of marijuana experts.
Oh, hi! I didn't see you there. My name's Ryan, and I'm just your average young voter. You caught me in my shop here, chopping wood. You know, when I'm chopping wood, I like to be safe. You know what else is safe? Legalizing and regulating marijuana. That's why I'm voting yes on Measure 91.
District Attorney Josh Markey for the No on Measure 91 campaign has not read Measure 91.
There's nothing in there about how the things are going to be packaged like you've seen.
Section 7, paragraphs 1 and 2A grant OLCC all the regulatory authority over sales and production.
There's nothing that says how it can be marketed. There's nothing that says how many hundreds of stores there can be in Portland.
Section 7, paragraphs 2F and G grant OLCC authority to regulate and even ban marijuana advertising. Section 29, paragraph 2A grants OLCC authority to limit the number of pot shops in a city or county.
And in fact, it's a two-pronged thing. One is, has the OLCC, which has done such a great job of keeping alcohol out of the hands of teenagers.
Teen drinking dropped from 1/2 to 1/3 in the last 7 years.
We'll regulate marijuana for commercial sale, but then completely unregulated and untaxed, people will be able to have 8 ounces of marijuana, which is about 400 joints.
Section 6, paragraph 1 only allows 8 ounces of marijuana in the home if one is growing 4 plants.
We actually rolled it to find out. A pound of edibles, an ounce of hash oil, 72 ounces of cannabis liquid, which I never even heard of, and each household can grow 4 plants.
Oregon has the same public possession, edibles, and liquid limits as Washington, and lower home grow, home possession, and hash oil limits than Colorado. Measure 91 has taken the best from Colorado and Washington laws and improved them. Learn the facts. Vote yes on Measure 91. This advertisement produced by the Russ Belville Show and is not sponsored or endorsed by the Yes on Measure 91 campaign. Welcome back, everyone. 14 after the hour. Time for us to go behind the headlines, and we turn to Radley Balco, who's got a new piece up in the Washington Post entitled, Surprise! Controversial Patriot Act power now overwhelmingly used in drug investigations. Now, if you don't know, let me fill you in on the background on this. The USA Patriot Act, and that is an acronym, by the way, United Standing Against blah, 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 but it's an acronym. The USA Patriot Act granted to law enforcement, federal law enforcement officials, a power that they kind of had in the past, but it was extremely broadened through the Patriot Act, called sneak and peek. Now, sneak and peek is where the cops can get a warrant to search your house, search your computer, search your car, but they don't ever have to tell you that your car was searched, that your house was searched, or that your computer was searched. It's basically a secret warrant, a warrant the cops can get to go search your stuff, but you're never informed about it. And we were told when this was passed, this was right in the aftermath of 9/11, this was only to go after terrorism. We have to use this to go after terrorism. It's an important tool to go after terrorism because if we filled out a warrant and told the terrorists that we were getting a warrant, they'd know, and then it would be tougher for us to find them, right? We wouldn't be able to get the terrorists if we tipped them off to the fact that we were investigating them. Now, at that time, people from the ACLU and other civil libertarians were saying, look, you give this power for terrorism and we can guarantee it's going to be abused. It's going to be, you let law enforcement have secret warrants to secretly search through people's stuff, they're going to do it. No, that would never happen. That would never happen, we were assured. This is just for terrorism. What, do you hate America? You like the terrorists? And of course, it went through with very little opposition. Well, now we're starting to get some of this data in from some of these sneak and peeks. And the Electronic Frontier Foundation published an analysis of this. They found that from September of 2001 to April of 2003, there were 47 sneak and peeks nationwide. Total. 47 in the whole country. And that's a span of almost 2 years. But of course, once law enforcement recognized that they could get secret warrants, they really started ramping up how many of these sneak and peeks they started to do. In 2010, the report tells us that there were 3,970 sneak and peek requests. Of those 3,970, 3,034 were for drug cases, narcotics cases. That's, 76%. 3 out of 4 sneak and peeks in 2010 were for drugs. And how many for terrorism? 37. Not 37%, people. 37 total. Out of 3,970 requests in 2010, 37 sneak and peeks were related to terrorism cases. That's less than 1%. That's 0.9%. And it's only gotten worse. The report for 2013 shows that there's 11,129. We went from about 4,000 to over 11,000 in the span of the last 3 years. Out of those 11,129 sneak and peek requests, 51 were for terrorism. 51 out of 11,000. 0.5%. 0.5% of sneak and peeks were for terrorism cases. How many for the narcotics cases? There were 9,401 requests for drug cases. That makes up 84% of all the sneak and peeks that were being issued. So since the Patriot Act has passed, we've gone from about 16 sneak and peeks a year to about 11,000 sneak and peeks a year. In a dozen years, from 16 a year to 11,000. So once again, we are seeing how the war on drugs is eviscerating our civil liberties. This perverse profit incentive that law enforcement officials have to go after drug cases at the expense of going after terrorism cases, or hell, how about them bankers out on Wall Street that crashed our economy? Haven't seen any of them in cuffs lately. Why don't we sneak and peek some of the CEOs of Chase Manhattan or HSBC? Oh, wait a minute. We don't have to sneak and peek those guys. They admit their crimes in court and only get fined. So I guess that's not a big deal, right? Now, this is not to say that these powers of sneak and peek shouldn't be used. There may indeed be some valid national security concerns for which a sneak and peek warrant is the proper law enforcement tool to bring down a terrorist plot. But we've got to bring a much tighter control over the use of these sneak and peek warrants and forbid them for the use of anything but terrorism cases. Or else we'll continue sliding down this slippery slope into a police state where there's no warrants, there's no due process. This is not the land of the free and the home of the brave that I took an oath to preserve, protect, and defend back in 1985.
You know, there are times where I've fallen off the wagon.
Welcome back, President Obama. We're glad you fell off the wagon. Maybe if you smoked a doobie from time to time, you might be able to deal better with some of these issues that we're coping with here in this country. Lay off the beer summits, Mr. President. It's time for a bong summit. It's 420 in Denver. That would be a good place to start. We'll be back with drug war data mining after this.
420 Radio, fighting prohibition since 2012. Are you a hypocrite? If you live a closeted cannabis lifestyle, you are. Read about 7 people living a closeted cannabis lifestyle who are on the verge of coming out in The Hypocrites by Mara K. Eaton. Available at areyouahypocrite.net. You can purchase the book on Amazon and Barnes & Noble, also available on iTunes. Check out Mara K. Eaton on Facebook as well. Learn more at areyouahypocrite.net.
Got a comment, question, complaint, or request for 420radio.org? Visit our contact page at 420radio.org.
At the age of 10, I was diagnosed with bone tumors growing outwardly on most long bones in the body. I could tear a vein, clot could break off, go to your heart, your brain, your lungs, and you're dead. Medical cannabis has saved my life. I was fortunate enough to become a federal patient, and I've not had a tumor new and develop since I was 21 years old, and I'm now 61 years old. What we need to be able to do is get other people off disability that aren't able to hold down a job because they're on different medications that give marginal results. On November 4th, Florida voters will have an opportunity to do the right thing, so please vote yes on Amendment.
Arguing for the end of adult marijuana prohibition is easy because we have facts, science, reason, compassion, evidence, truth, and logic on our side. It is even easier when researchers catalog it all for us. Learn how to gather the facts on marijuana use, arrests, seizures, rehabs, drug tests, and more in this edition of Drug War Data Mining.
All right, welcome back, everyone. 22 after the hour, and just going back to my Twitter account here for Sheriff Bergen, who had a quote. This was in the New York Times that had a story talking about Oregon's Measure 91 and the Kevin Sabet Oregon Marijuana Education Tour that we successfully killed half of, and discussed that tactic. It didn't name me specifically, but it was talking about what we did as far as the records requests and so forth. In response to the fact that the Yes on 91 campaign has raised millions and the No on 91 campaign has only raised $168,000, 98.6% of that from the sheriffs and narcotics enforcers, there's a quote from Sheriff Tom Bergen who said, quote, "We've got daytime jobs. The potheads don't. This is their job to get this legalized." End quote. So I see, Sheriff Bergen, the contention here is that we're the potheads. We don't have jobs. We're just on unemployment, sucking down welfare and spending all our time trying to get things legalized. Now, I can't speak for everyone because it's true, this is my full-time job. Legalization is all I do. But I thought it might be interesting to take a look at the Drug War Data Mine and go to the National Surveys on Drug Use and Health. This is their 2-year RDAS, and it contains information broken down at a state level on whether or not people use certain drugs and various other demographics about them. So I thought it'd be interesting to take Sheriff Bergen's comment at face value, that the potheads don't have day jobs. So I found a series of variables that work really well for telling us this story. For our row, we're going to use a variable called EmpStatY. This is the revised employment status. It will tell us whether or not someone is full-time employed, part-time employed, unemployed, or out of the job market. For our column, we'll use MRJYR. This is past year use of marijuana. So for the epithet of potheads, we're going to count anybody who smoked pot in the previous year because they would be trying to legalize it this year, we will assume. Then for our control, we'll use the year pair indicator, YRPRIND. This breaks the data down by the 2-year chunks so that we can get the latest data, which is 2010 to 2011. And finally, our selection filters. In our selection filters, we're going to go with state 41. That's Oregon. The state of Oregon is the 41st state in their list. And age 21 to 103. Because really, it shouldn't be counted against us if someone smoked pot in the past year and they're 14 years old and obviously don't have a job. Besides, legalization of marijuana under Measure 91 that supposedly us unemployed potheads that don't have jobs and are fighting to legalize, That Measure 91 only legalizes for people 21 and older. So really, it's only fair to talk about us 21 and older potheads who supposedly don't have jobs. So, our row, EMP-STAT-Y, our column, MRJ-YR, our control, YR-PRIND, and our selection filters, state 41 and age 21 to 103. 103 is the oldest person they got data on. We'll run that table and see just what we come up with. And we'll have to scroll down just a little bit to get to the 2010 numbers. And here we go, 2010, 2011. Let's see if I can scoot this over just a little bit for us to see it a little better on the screen for those of us who are watching on the screen. There's our data. For people who did not use marijuana in the past year, 50.5% of them were full-time employed. For people who did use marijuana in the past year, 53.1% of them were full-time employed. More potheads have full-time jobs than non-potheads. For people who did not use marijuana in the past year, 12.2% of them are employed part-time. For people who did smoke marijuana in the past year, 19.1% of them are employed part-time. Once again, when we look at part-time work, potheads are more likely to be employed than non-potheads. Adding the two figures, we get 62.7% of the non-tokers who are employed full-time or part-time. Adding together the people who have smoked marijuana, we get, 72.2? Am I adding that correctly? Yeah, about 72.2% have been employed full-time or part-time if they've used marijuana in the past year. Now, unemployment is double for people who are pot smokers, but then again, when you get fired for smoking pot, that would explain a whole lot of that.
420 Radio, your ticket to the Boston Freedom Rally. The law offices of Omar Figueroa would like to remind you to stand up for your rights. If you are detained or arrested, treat law enforcement with respect and stand up for your rights by repeating, "I respectfully invoke all of my legal and constitutional rights. I do not consent to any search and seizure. I want to remain silent, and I want to speak with my attorney." Please contact the law offices of Omar Figueroa at 415-489-0420 or 707-829-0215 or on the web at...
Oh, hi! I guess I didn't see you there. My name is Ryan, and I'm just an average college voter. Caught me here reading my favorite book. You know, reading is really sexy. But you know what else is sexy? Taxing marijuana and using the revenue for education. That's why I'm voting yes on Measure 91.
You know Herb Thrasher from the Herb Thrasher Flower Hour. Now get ready for Herb Age Designs for the proud cannabis consumer. Herb Age Designs, lifestyle gear for the 420 friendly. Herb Age Designs, we've got Frisbee golf discs and durable hemp gear. Herb Age Designs, we've got shot glasses, drinking glasses, coffee mugs, and beer cozies. Check us out on Facebook and online at herbagedesigns.com. And follow Herb Age and Herb Thrasher on Twitter.
One of the most disturbing elements of the Prohibition War is how it's made police the enemy of otherwise law-abiding cannabis consumers. Fortunately, one group of police officers knows the futility of prohibition and reaches out to educate the community and current law enforcement. Today, the Russ Belville Show visits with another speaker from Law Enforcement Against Prohibition with one clear message: cops say legalize drugs.
Welcome back, everybody. 30 after the hour, and for Cops Say Legalize Drugs on this eve of the election, we've got one of my favorite people. Diane Goldstein is on the line. Diane, welcome back.
Thanks, Russ. Really appreciate everything you've been doing up in Oregon, and I'm glad I've been able to at least contribute a little bit.
Oh, I'm glad so, too. Thank you so much for your contribution to our fight against Kevin Sabet's Oregon Marijuana Education Tour. It got written up in the New York Times. I don't know if you saw that.
Oh, actually, Actually, I didn't. Interesting.
Yeah.
I'll go back and take a look.
Yeah, I wish they didn't mention me by name or anything, but they did get a quote from Sheriff Tom Bergen saying the potheads don't have jobs. That's trying to legalize is all they do. So there we go.
Oh, sigh. I know. You know, it's just beyond. I think it's been very frustrating watching the election this year from my standpoint, because it's almost like, you know, the whole Gandhi quote, first they laugh at you, you know, and then, you know, they start lying about you. Mm-hmm. And the lies, the misinformation, the acts of omission have been so stunning across Alaska, you know, D.C., Florida, and in Oregon in particular. And I don't know if this is just one of those things that they're just throwing Hail Marys and hoping that something sticks. Is their strategic plan?
Yeah, that's what it seems like. Now, I wanted to get you on the show here. You're down in California, and everybody's talking about Alaska and Oregon and Florida and all these D.C. and these votes that are going on. But California's got an important vote, too, that's kind of sliding by people's radar here. Let's talk about Prop 47.
You know what? I'll tell you, I was just at a Prop 47 function this last week, a little fundraiser, and it's polling at 59% to pass at this point. So Prop 47, what it does, it's a decriminalization law. It is not a legalization law. And as much as I hate incrementalism, I think this proposition is vitally important. The two proponents are George Gascon, who is the district attorney of San Francisco, who's a retired Los Angeles Police Department deputy chief, and I think he was a police chief at a couple other agencies, and Bob Lansdowne, who's the retired police chief from San Diego PD. And their frustration has been that they have tried to promote policy reform within the legislature, but the California police chiefs, the California narcotics officers, and, you know, all the other cops have basically stymied dealing with this issue of mass incarceration in California. And so they did this initiative, which basically reduces any drug possession to misdemeanors. Now, what's interesting about this is no different than, I believe, something like 13 other states have this type of laws, which includes, you know, petty thefts and forgeries. But what's amazing is that if this passes, this is the first time a state has actually rolled back felonization. You know, so we're trying to turn the tide back to being smart on crime versus being tough on crime.
Now, I know the politics down there in California, you face the mighty prison guards union down there. They got a lot of sway in Sacramento. How is this able to stand at 60% right now when they're probably throwing everything they got against it, I'd imagine?
Yeah, you know, it's really interesting is the against folks have not been very well funded. Now, what they're hoping is that all the law enforcement associations and unions are, you know, publicly proclaiming no on 47, but they aren't putting their money where their mouths are. It's kind of different than what the Oregon sheriffs have done. And interesting enough is they're using one of their spokespeople is actually the lobbyist for the California police chiefs, who also happens to be the lobbyist for the California narcotics officers. Now, the Prison Guard Union, I haven't seen anything coming out from CCPOA, but they have traditionally for years funded a victims organization that plays a very prominent role in lobbying in California. And this victims organization is also calling for its defeat. But I think clearly one of the things that has happened is that, you know, Californians are sick and tired, almost I think that same, you know, dealing with the power and the hubris of law enforcement. You know, law enforcement could have done themselves some huge favors by sitting down at the table, becoming stakeholders, working with people to redesign the system for what it was meant to be. But on a personal level, I think they're just afraid of losing power and control. And so, like in other initiatives, they're also, omitting facts about the initiative or trying to scare people. So one of the fear factors here in the No on 47 folks is that they're saying because it reduces drug possession to a misdemeanor, that people who possess GHB, that we won't be able to charge them with date rape. And it's just such a ludicrous statement. And so, the No on 47 has been very good about rebutting a lot of these falsehoods that they're dealing with.
Prop 47 in California, the defelonization measure. We're talking with Diane Goldstein, a board member with Law Enforcement Against Prohibition. It's looking good. You say the polls are looking good for this, for 60%, and this would then dovetail into what everyone is looking for 2016, a legalization push in California. And what do you think the effect of the 2014 midterms are going to be on California 2016? Given the choices of, Oregon and Alaska pass versus Oregon and Alaska fail, how do you think that might affect California?
So here's the thing that concerns me. I personally think I'm very optimistic about Oregon, and I'm very optimistic about D.C. with 71. I think Alaska and Florida are still kind of toss-ups. And so one of the things that concerns me is, if 2 out of 4 pass, we can call it a draw with the anti-prohibitionists. But if more lose, it's going to make it much more difficult in California to, I think, really focus and move forward. I think we're still going to do it. We're still going to have a 2016 initiative. But I think finally that some of the anti-prohibitionists, like one of the things that I read, is the casino mogul who's funding Florida has basically said that he's on a mission to do this across the country now. And so that's going to be a very interesting thing because we all know that it's about money. If we're going to run successful initiatives, it is about money. And so if California is going to win, we're going to have to start raising money now in order to beat them at their own game, so to speak.
One of the specific things California has to deal with that perhaps other states don't have to deal with, aside from being huge like it is almost a victim of your own success with Prop 215 and the ubiquity in some places in the state of medical marijuana, leading people to think, what's the big deal? I can get my card. I don't need to change anything. Is there a concerted coalition effort moving into 2016? I know things were fractured after Prop 19 lost, and a lot of people couldn't get it together for 2012. What is the outlook for 2016?
You know what? I think that it's a very positive outlook. You have the Coalition for Cannabis Policy Reform that is taking steps now to try to work as a coalition partner with both the Marijuana Policy Project and with the Drug Policy Alliance. And so CCPR, has representatives from LEAP, from SSDP, from NORML, from Emerald Growers Association, the ACLU. So everybody's talking right now. And I think what's going to happen is we will be talking and setting strategies and doing kind of a division of labor and seeing who's going to do what. But at this point, I believe that everyone's going to be working well together because our eye's on the prize. Is we understand that if California fails in 2016, it really is going to impact, I think, the rest of the United States. And interesting, so we'll have to have this conversation after the elections. If Prop 47 passes, and in California there's a lot of small local initiatives being done, and a lot of them are polling real well. One of the things that I think is really important is we've had some success as drug policy reformers in California in pushing back against the influence of law enforcement in this last year. If Prop 47 passes, it is stripping away influence from law enforcement that is badly needed in California and across the United States.
All right. One last topic here, since we talk to you a lot and you often give us your perspective on how police should be peace officers. That kind of got thrust into the national spotlight with the events in Ferguson. I've talked to other LEAP speakers about this and how the drug war contributes to actions like what we saw in Ferguson from the police, or in NYPD stop and frisk and so forth, even when the cases don't directly involve drugs. Any comment?
Yeah, did you see my latest on, as I'm calling it, T-shirt gate?
Oh no, I haven't. Oh, the fuck the growers T-shirt.
Yeah, yes. Exactly. So I have an article published that basically it's called "Cops Gone Wild," T-shirt gate, and the culture. It's really the culture of ignorance, and it's a really important article because the mainstream media just focused on the shirt. Oh my God, this guy's wearing a profanity-laced shirt. And what I focused on is, the guy has now been identified as a supervisor by Americans for Safe Access. And what I focused on was the culture of law enforcement and very specifically the culture amongst narcotics officers. And so that statement, which is what I believe because I've seen it, they heard that statement, fuck the growers. Okay, they heard that in a training that's been conducted by the California Narcotics Officers Association that's heavily influenced by the federal government and the DEA. So what they're saying is we don't care about state law. We're going to do the federal side. And so we need to eliminate multi-agency jurisdictional narcotics task forces that have federal government people attached to it.
Yep.
If the feds want to come in here, let them. But state, local cops should not be working with them in narcotics cases because of that very thing.
Yeah, a little bit of conflict of interest there.
They ignore the rule of law.
Absolutely. Diane Goldstein is a retired lieutenant commander with the Redondo Beach Police Department and a board member for Law Enforcement Against Prohibition. Check them out at leap.cc. You can get great speakers just like Diane to appear at your event and tell the truth about ending the war on drugs. Thanks, Diane, and we'll talk to you on election night.
Thanks, Russ.
When we come back, Oregon's KTVL gives cops a free 5-minute anti-legalization ad on last night's news. I got a few things to say about that. We'll be right back.
You're tuned into the Russ Belville Show, the voice of the marijuana nation.
420 Radio, freeing your mind 24 hours a day. Growing plants indoors can be a rewarding hobby, but electricity bills can go through the roof. Then you have to cool down all those big hot lights. It can drive a grower insane. With Lush LED lighting, you can solve many of these issues and double your rewards. Matt and his scientists have developed the perfect light for flowering plants with far less cost and heat. And the results? Very effective. Check out LushLEDlighting.com right now and tell them Radical Russ sent you. In the interest of fair and balanced journalism, the Russ Belville Show presents the anti-drug public service announcement of the day.
Well, there's this girl on my block. Every time I see her, she asks me to get high. And every time I tell her that I'm not into that. She says all the kids are doing it. If that's true, then why doesn't she find someone else to do it with?
This has been the anti-drug public service announcement of the day. To cure this sort of reefer madness, listen to the Russ Belville Show every weekday on 420 Radio.
My name is Ryan Dazel, and I work for a textile manufacturing company, and before that I used to be a farmer. I am a supporter of Measure 91, the legalization of marijuana here in Oregon, but not only for that, for the legalization of industrial hemp. Hemp is related to marijuana, but hemp is not a drug, and we still can't grow it here in Oregon. Measure 91 will fix that. Oregon is a great state to grow hemp. We have the right soil, the right climate, and it's a great cash crop for Oregon farmers. Anywhere you can grow corn, you can grow hemp, except no herbicides and minimal amount of pesticides are needed for this crop. The hemp clothing you see at the store and the hemp seed you see at the grocery store all comes from overseas and our neighbors from the north. That's money we could be keeping here in Oregon. Farming is a difficult business, and with a cash crop like hemp, it can make all the difference.
The truth.
Entirely legitimate topic for debate.
You have offended my family.
Hey, this is great, man.
And you have offended a Shaolin temple.
One major responsibility is to encourage people to use less drugs.
I know nothing.
I support a change in law to end federal criminal penalties for possession of up to 1 ounce of marijuana.
We don't need no stinking budget.
Homosexuality, immorality generally.
How in the century you have slurred the meaning of the words we, the people.
Be warned, this is not your mother's marijuana.
You could ask yourself a question. Do I feel lucky? Well, do you, punk?
I want to ask you a bunch of questions. I want to have them answered immediately.
Surely you can't be serious.
I am serious. And don't call me Shirley.
Radical Rant. Welcome back, everyone. 46 after the hour, and we're less than a week away from voting to legalize marijuana in Oregon under Measure 91. The Yes on 91 campaign has bankrolled millions in donations and is airing pro-legalization advertisements on television stations across the state. The No on 91 campaign has bankrolled a measly $168,000. 98% of that from the Oregon State Sheriff's Association and the Oregon Narcotics Enforcement Association, and has aired no TV ads. Unless you count the helpful people at Medford's KTVL, which last night aired a hit piece on legalization that might as well have been a 5-minute ad for the No on Measure 91 campaign. Cops were given free rein to utter all their untrue reefer madness talking points, and the reporter made no attempt to balance the coverage with response from the Yes on Measure 91 campaign. The piece, which was entitled "A High State of Mind, Law Enforcement and the Oregon Liquor Control Commission Discuss Regulatory Changes if Measure 91 Passes," begins with the Klamath County Sheriff, Frank Scraw, saying voting for Measure 91 will mean more deaths on Oregon roads. Quote, "There's enough carnage on the highway, we sure as heck don't need any more," said Sheriff Scraw in full uniform for the cameras. Evidence, perhaps? We don't need no stinking evidence. It's not as if there's already 2 states that have legalized marijuana, and both of them have declining rates of traffic fatalities. It's not as if the reporter could have checked some unknown small-town newspaper like, say, the Washington Post to prove Sheriff Scraw wrong in his prediction. Sheriff Scraw was allowed to continue, unfact-checked, as he intoned how much enforcement costs would rise under legalization. Quote, "You need a DRE, a drug recognition expert. That requires additional training. That requires additional time. That requires bringing that DRE in to give the folks that are arrested a different set of sobriety examinations, and the cost of that's going to be astronomical." End quote, said Sheriff Scraw. Astronomical? You keep using that word. I do not think it means what you think it means. If the reporter had bothered to read Measure 91, she could have pointed out that 35% of the tax revenue coming from Measure 91 goes to law enforcement, particularly to help them hire and train more DREs. Sheriff Scraw's astronomical cost was estimated by the Secretary of State's office to be $400,000 annually for 3 new highway interdiction team members, training of all advanced roadside impairment driving enforcement, and training of drug recognition experts. Whereas Measure 91 is estimated to bring in $17 to $40 million annually. Next in the KTVL report, the chair of the Oregon Liquor Control Commission, Rob Patridge, complained about the lack of a per se THC in blood standard to measure driving impairment. Quote, "Just like there's .08 for alcohol, that is not included in this particular measure," end quote, said Patridge. The truth? You can't handle the truth. I mean, he's right insofar as Measure 91 lacks a per se THC standard.
But was there any mention of the fact that THC isn't like alcohol and no scientific standard exists? Did they bother to mention that driving while high is a crime that cops bust people for now, even without a standard? And did they bother to mention that Measure 91 dedicates funds to the study of a scientific, reliable standard? No. Then, the chair of the OLCC, who really should know better, claims that Measure 91 is going to allow unlimited pot shops throughout the state and that anyone can hold any number and any type of marijuana licenses. Quote, "You can be a producer, a distributor, and a wholesaler and sell. So you can hold all 4 licenses," end quote, said Patridge. Well, that leads me to ask, why isn't there a bar and a liquor store on every block in Oregon? Oh, because the OLCC has the regulatory authority to limit them, just as they are given that authority to limit pot shops under Measure 91. Too bad that reporter's not as familiar with the liquor laws as Rob Patridge should be, who knows damn well that you can be a producer, distributor, wholesaler, and seller if you're one of Oregon's many craft brewers or vintners. And maybe that reporter would have pointed out that Measure 91 treats marijuana exactly the same way. The OLCC chair, Patridge, continues in this KTVL hit piece by lamenting that they, and not the federal government, will oversee the packaging and labeling of marijuana products. Quote, "It's new ground and new territory for Oregon and in the United States. We're going to look to Washington and Colorado to see what they've done, but we're going to do it Oregon's way," said Patridge. Labeling, packaging, and testing marijuana is only new ground for the OLCC. The reporter fails to mention the fact that the Oregon Health Authority and the Department of Agriculture will be assisting OLCC in the labeling, packaging, and testing, and that the OHA has now had over a year's experience labeling, packaging, and testing medical marijuana. Next, KTVL turns to Jackson County District Attorney Beth Heckert, who's allowed to slam marijuana edibles while pictures of Halloween scenes appear on the screen. Quote, "Our whole point is no one under 21 is going to be using this product, so why are we making them so attractive to children?" said Heckert. Where is this planet where adults don't like gummy bears? These are products that are sold now in Oregon medical marijuana dispensaries where you have to be 21 to enter, where your ID is checked at the point of sale, and where the products won't leave the store unless they're in opaque, child-proof containers. Those are the rules the OHA mandated, and there's no reason to think that they wouldn't mandate them for recreational products, especially since Section 7 of Measure 91 gives OLCC all the authority they need to prohibit any marketing, any packaging, or any advertising that would appeal to kids. Next, in the KTVL 5-minute free ad against Measure 91, the district attorney complains about the smell that might come with home marijuana gardens come harvest time. Quote, "They can't open their windows. They can't go out and enjoy their backyard because of the odor," end quote, explained Heckert. Why do opponents of Measure 91 think that legalizing marijuana repeals all other laws? There are currently laws against creating public nuisances. You can bet if I piled 100 pounds of pig manure in my backyard, the city would have plenty of codes and ordinances to force me to clean it all up. If someone's garden is causing a nuisance, the city can already deal with it. KTVL returns to the OLCC chair, Patridge, who then laments the fact that the OLCC hasn't studied marijuana yet. Quote, "By Oregon law, we're restricted at the Liquor Control Commission. You can't spend the liquor money on non-liquor regulatory things. We certainly have had the opportunity as part of what we're doing to study that, but we can't go out and spend money on a ballot measure unless it passes," end quote, says Patridge. Right. And when Measure 91 does pass, the OLCC is given plenty of money, and until July 1st, 2015, before the law is in effect, and until January 1st, 2016, to study, create, and promulgate the rules on marijuana. You'd think a reporter who read Measure 91 would bring up the fact that OLCC will have over a year of study before the first legal pot is sold. Next, KTVL, in their 5-minute hit piece on Measure 91, returns to Sheriff Scraw, who isn't sanguine on the idea that taxing marijuana will reap any money for his department. Quote, "I mean, I believe in the Tooth Fairy and the Easter Bunny too. Come on," said Scraw. District Attorney Heckert added, quote, "I'm just skeptical that there would be a big influx of money, but time will tell," end quote. Show me the money! Show me the money! Well, you remember how Sheriff Scraw figured that $400,000 in costs was astronomical? Well, once again, here's the opportunity for the reporter to ask Sheriff Scraw and DA Heckert what adjective they'd use to describe the $17 million to $40 million that the Secretary of State's office estimates Measure 91 will reap, or to mention the fact that 35% of the money will be going to law enforcement. It'd also be nice to mention that the tax revenue in Washington and Colorado keeps increasing month by month. District Attorney Heckert concludes by implying that legalization of marijuana isn't going to reduce the workload of cops and courts. Quote, "You're still going to have people growing on public lands. You're still going to have people transporting it across state lines and receiving the money back, and all of those issues that we currently prosecute. Those cases are not going to go away because of Measure 91. End quote, said Heckert. Well, surprise! Marijuana legalization does not end all crime. But what Measure 91 does is ensures that up to 13,000 Oregonians don't get tickets or arrests for personal marijuana possession and cultivation. The reporter might have mentioned that in Washington, arrests for personal possession declined from over 5,000 a year to under 200. In Colorado, the monthly arrests for all marijuana offenses declined from roughly 700 a month to about 130. Now, KTVL is in Medford. Medford is in Jackson County. Jackson County is in southern Oregon, and it's part of the so-called Emerald Triangle region of America, where the best marijuana on earth is cultivated. There is high-intensity drug trafficking area designation for those parts, which leads to a lot of federal grant money for law enforcement. In the most recent Oregon Asset Forfeiture Report, the Medford Police Department netted over $213,000 in seized cash and property, and District Attorney Heckert's office netted over $42,000. So it's easy to understand why law enforcement in Southern Oregon is spreading falsehoods and scares about marijuana legalization. It's their job, and to some extent, their budget on the line. But once law enforcers leave that job, they're free to express what 30 former law enforcers recently told news organizations in Northern Oregon. Treating marijuana use as a crime in Oregon has failed, and it's time to vote yes on Measure 91. But what I have trouble understanding is why a journalist would produce such a one-sided hit piece to help law enforcement spread their message on television, and why a news station would let her do so without affording the opposition a chance to rebut. After all, KTVL is a CBS affiliate, not Fox News. So, got a few problems with that. We'll have a link for that. This entire rant is up at radicalruss.com with links to the original video from the news piece that aired last night. I also have this written up on Huffington Post Media. If you check out the Huffington Post Media page, you'll find it there. Please like it, share it, upvote it, whatever it is we got to do. Because this kind of monkeying around with our elections should not be allowed to stand. In Hour 2, I'll tell you a little bit about KTVL and its ownership, and maybe you'll understand a little more why they were so happy to give 5 minutes of free anti-legalization advertising on their news station last night. It's the October surprise. There always is one of them in there. But that's all the time we got for Hour 1. Thanks for joining us. Stay tuned for Hour 2. We'll get more in depth on this story. I'm Radical Russ. For everyone here at 420radio.org, thanks for joining us. Until next time, take care of each other, tokers.
This is the Russ Belville Show. The Russ Belville Show is blogging and podcasting daily at radicalruss.com.